Well, I'm originally from Ohio, Akron, Cleveland area. But I've been traveling since then, and I come to Miami, Florida area, usually in the winters, every couple of years or so. Then I go back up north for the summertime. Although during the 90s, I was living down here in Miami Beach for a couple of years. Oh, mainly because of the ocean. I like Miami Beach. It's the clearest water in the United States, although I don't always get down there as much as I used to because now it's so crowded, so I end up in Hollywood. And a couple times when I'm heading north up there in the spring, I'll stop at Daytona Beach because you can drive on the beach, although they've limited that over the years. And it's still a lot of fun to go catch some good waves there too, body surfing. Well, I got friends in California, so I used to live in California after high school and college. And then I've got friends in Arizona and also Sun Valley, Idaho, which I also lived in for a while, for a couple of years. But then I moved to a northern part of Idaho to work for a billionaire. I built him a big 42-foot passive solar greenhouse for a billionaire. His name is Joe Clark, the late Joe Clark. He's passed on now, but he had a 7,000-acre ranch, 800 head of cattle, and he had all these fly-ins, and he'd entertain the seals that would come out there for R&R. So I built him a big passive solar 42-foot by 16-foot high passive solar greenhouse, stocked it with every 5-in-1 dwarf fruit tree and all the bananas, apples, tropical and American you can think of. Yeah, 40 years ago. Well, I remember even in the 90s, that wasn't quite 40 years ago, but I remember in 62 down at Miami Beach, it was hardly anybody was down there. And then in 1971, I went down there living on the beach. Actually, it was the last giant 2-story house on the beach. It was the last house that the Miami Beach, they were expanding the boardwalk, and it was the last house they were bought up. And I'd spent the last winter down there with it. And it was right on the beach. The guy in the 30s, he had a choice to build himself a yacht or a house on the beach. So he built himself a 2-story house on the beach with you may say, a balcony that overlooked the ocean. And there was a swimming pool right out back, right on the edge of the beach. And we could fill it full of ocean water. It was great. It had a low board and a high board. And it was a lot of fun there. And there was a number of people who lived in the house together. So that was in 71. Well, electric cars, the way they're standing now, they're pretty incredible pieces of machinery. I mean, if you go to YouTube and you type in the Rimac Navara, it's only a $2.5 million car. It's all-wheel electric, fastest production car in the whole freaking world, breaking all records. 0 to 60 in 1.74 seconds, and they gave a Porsche, found the fastest Porsches they made, a 2-second start in a quarter mile, and halfway down the track, the Romero just flew by that car. And then he was so amazed when he finished it, he couldn't get used to the acceleration of the car. So then he put it in the street mode, which is called the granny mode. And he said it was the most docile, smooth-riding car in the street mode that he's ever driven. So from that standpoint, they're incredible pieces of equipment. And I'm thinking, gee, you don't have a crankcase, you don't have the oil, the expense, you got seal bearings, and you don't have probably transmissions because it's instant torque. You just put more electricity to the power, to the wheel, the motor, and you get more faster power, just like that. So I don't know that much about it, but as far as the batteries go, they're unsustainable because it takes way too many resources of the planet to make those friggin' things, and they're too expensive. However, a lot of people have heard about Nikola Tesla in the 1900s, who basically invented wireless electricity. But J.P. Morgan, he was building the Walden Tower, I don't know, one tower in New York, another one in Colorado. And when J.P. Morgan was funding him at the time, he kind of like said, "You're doing what?" J.P. Morgan wanted bucks. You can't do something for free. So he just shut them down, tore down the towers, and Anyway, it burned down his place, and before that the CIA grabbed all his technology. But the thing is that I also heard that in 1921 he had a wireless electric car. So yes, so they come out with a wireless electric car. I dumped this thing in a second. Put it in a museum right away. Well, we're going to 0-point energy, which is basically free electricity. We're talking the new quantum computer system. From what I understand, they say, oh, you've got to have a giant computer and it's got to be minus 20 degrees cooled and it's all that. Well, the quantum computer system that's going to be introduced here to the planet real soon this year, and we're going to get free quantum phones. Basically, it doesn't run on electricity, it doesn't hook up to the electric grid, it runs on the same type of electricity that our bodies run on. So, it's a whole different ballgame. Good question. Well, this is a 1964 Chevrolet Corvette I've had for 24 years. It was an abandoned restoration project. They've been sitting in a garage since 1988, and it was basically a wrecked frame that was straightened, and they put a body on it, and I had to straighten the frame again to get the correct wheel alignment, and a drivetrain, and that's how I bought it, with a whole bunch of extra parts for $12,000 back in 1999. And the gas tank in the car was just about a couple inches thick. It was so bad it was like coffee. So anyway, I had the owner sit in there in a orange crate behind the wheel, and I borrowed my battery and my coil and put it in there and poured some gas down the carburetor. He turned the ignition and I feathered the thing to see if the darn thing would run. But anyway, I ended up rebuilding the engine right after that because the heads were bad and the studs pulled out. And it was kind of a bastardized car, so I've been working on it ever since. Now, however, originally my first car in '63 was a 1963 Corvette right off the showroom floor. Actually, it wasn't planned that way because I did a lot of homework, and it was between that and the Avanti. And they were great because they had a 150 horsepower or 150 mile an hour car with a supercharger on it. And anyway, I went with this because of better weight distribution. It was like 48 in the front, 52 in the rear, and I don't regret that decision. So I ordered this 300 horsepower Daytona blue white top convertible with a hard top, and I waited 3 months for the car. I finally went in to pick the car up. The car was gone, and so was the guy below me, some Firestone executive who bought the car and paid the salesman off. So anyway, I got my money back and went to another Chevy place and bought it off the showroom floor. And I liked it so much I put 88,000 miles on it in a year and a half. Before my buddy got me drunk in California and we raced some XK doing 100 miles an hour, and I tried to hit my exit toward the Hollywood exit. It's 60 to 0 in about 3 feet. The friend of the car went in. Neither of us were hurt, but that was the end of the car for the time being. Pretty much absolutely everything. I had repaired the heads immediately when I got the engine because it had been a factory rebuilt engine on it, bored out, and piston rings, but the heads, this rebuilder just put some cheap heads on, the studs pulled out. They wanted $800 to repair the heads, those 202 Chevy heads that were good, humpback they call them. And anyway, I sold them pretty cheap, and for $800, I bought Sportsman, World Product Sportsman 2 heads with the 64cc runners in it. And I had them milled later on a little bit, and I used the hypereutetic Keith Black pistons in it, and roller rocker cam and lifters later on. And then finally the frame rusted out some years after that because it's my driver, and I was able to put a Richmond 6-speed overdrive in here instead of the 4-speed for my drivability, because I love the horsepower. And there's no power windows, no power brakes, no power steering. The only power is at the engine, for simplicity, and I'm kind of a horsepower and gas mileage junkie. Even my '63 Corvette, I remember with a 336 axle and a 327, 250 horsepower. I got 19 miles a gallon out of it. Now in these upgraded ones, I get maybe in the mid-20s. But incidentally, I might mention that over the past years, I've had this for 24 years, I went through 4 different throttle body electronic fuel injection. MSD Edelbrock, $2,800 fast, and then finally what I call the best one, the Phytech, which was really good. You just basically put in your engine parameters, that's it, the infinite adjustments, you skip all that, and it's great. But the problem was, the fan sensor went out down here in the hot traffic in Miami a couple of years ago and cooked my engine, and so I'm back on a 4-barrel now. The first question they ask, what year is it? And then some people, they just basically just want to say, I love your car, it's beautiful. Down here, it's almost every day.
Every day?
Yeah, pretty much. And not only that, but a lot of times, once every week, somebody will want to buy my car. Even though I tell them you don't see a for sale sign, and it's not for sale. Well, everything's for sale if you got enough money, even integrity. Since the 50s or 60s, that was before when we had last days of integrity. Oh, yeah, well, it's not worth it. To me it is, because see, if I was to sell it, all the modifications I do, I'd have to buy another car. For what would I pay for it? You know, you might get a good one for $40,000, $50,000. And then I'd have to strip it all down and make all the changes that I did from the frame to undercoating it with Cosmoline and the 6-speed transmission from Richmond. They don't even make it anymore. You can put a 6-speed in there. It's a Tremec, but you got to expand the whole tunnel for the transmission because it's a lot wider, and then it's not original anymore. But the Richmond 6-speed fits right in there. So I probably wouldn't want to sell it. So I said, oh, $100,000. You might as well go to eBay. It's where you can take your pick. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I just heard on the beach the other guy said, I love your car. I got a soft spot. I used to have a 66 Corvette. He says, a friend of mine just bought a new Corvette, and he was driving around for quite a while. Not that long, I guess. And he finally said, I don't like this car. I mean, the phone's ringing, it's talking to me, everything's power, windows, power seats, heated steering wheel. Well, I don't know about that, but heated seats. He says, I don't like it. So, and you can't even get them with a stick shift anymore. It's all paddle shift and everything's power. You got power windows and power mirrors on the outside, and it's like nothing's manual. This is manual. It's so easy. If it breaks, you can fix it. It doesn't last a lot longer. No, I'm just a guy who loves my Corvette, and I rebuilt the whole thing all myself. I do everything from installing the top to painting the body and replacing fenders and engine, transmission work, interior. I just do it all. Nobody touches my car. Except the engine block if I take it out and have to have it bored or something like that. It doesn't matter because the paint's so bad on it. I got burned on a PPG. They sent me an expired hardener, and you couldn't see the code. It's not user friendly. It doesn't say use by such and such a date, as these food products say. So it's peeling from 2 layers down. Plus, with the KBS clear coat, I've never seen a paint job that would shrink, crack, bubble, and peel the way this has. And not only that, where it hasn't peeled, this KBS clear coat, it somehow stains inside the paint, and you can polish the coat, but you can't get rid of the stains inside the paint. It's ridiculous. And that's when I hear it. This is 5, maybe 7 years paint job, something like that, from the KBS. Well, they ran this style, the Stingray style, from 63 to 67, and it was the first year of independent suspension, which was a big seller on the cars. So in 63, it had all the bugs on it. I know because I had one and I had all the bugs. And that was my first car. This one's a 64. And the reason I chose a 64 because in 64, they ironed out all the bugs. And like for instance, it had a stainless steel grill in 63 and 64. And after that, it went to pot metal. And then the door panels, you can see they're nice vinyl, and this is stainless steel, and the armrest is off a Chevy. You can take it apart, put it on there, and the carpet can replace, or you can place it all in once, but it lasts. After that, they went to one molded piece of rigid plastic, which eventually gets a crack in it, and there goes your whole piece, $300 or $400. So that's why I bought the 64. I consider it the best year, even though it doesn't bring the most money, because the ones that bring the most money are the split window 63 coupe, which is basically a pain in the neck back then because everybody was complaining because it blocked their view, so they ripped all the bars out. Now they're putting them all back because that's the icon car that everyone wants. That and the 427 with the big engine. But the problem with that is it made it nose heavy and it screwed up the perfect weight distribution of 48 in the front and 52 in the rear. So it made it nose heavy with the extra car. So that's why I bought the 64 Corvette. Yeah, the seat covers. I like the vinyl and the leather, they last, and we got vinyl on the door panels, but I went leather on the seat covers. And the first mistake I made was, well, I had a lot of silicone oil I used to use on the tires. And silicone is great for rubber, anything on rubber. But you don't want to use silicone on the seat covers because although it polishes them and makes them look really good, and you can use it on vinyl fine, eventually it'll dry the leather out and it'll crack, and I'll ruin my seat covers using the silicone. And finally I went with Al Knox. The recommendation, he's got some of the best interior seat covers you can get, and he recommends using Pledge, and it's got oils in it for the wood and the leather, and it also has a little bit of wax in there. So after that you can polish it up and it gives a nice sheen to it, as well as preserving the leather and keeps it from drying out. Okay, I first want to tell you about the front end here. I kept the front bumpers off, but after an accident with a suicide deer in Wyoming about 70 miles an hour in the middle of the night, I'm going to put the bumpers back on. But what happened was, 70 miles an hour driving through Wyoming, pitch black real early in the morning, my headlights, the suicide deer at the last second, they're nuts. They jumped right out. His head totally busted I heard the glass smash, and this whole thing was busted up in pieces and off across the highway. And of course, they're jumping. I'm doing 70. The deer is probably jumping about 20 miles an hour at minimum. So his head busts that, and then his whole body wraps around the whole freaking car, takes off my fender back to here, rips it clean off, and the rest of his body comes around here and slams into my door. And of course, it popped it in, the paint all chipped off, and there was blood, guts, and poop all over the side of the car, and hair was even embedded in my paint that I had to wash off. But there's nothing wrong with the panel because fiberglass is really solid. But then I replaced this panel with American Custom Industries panels. I said, this is basically 3 panels in one. The top piece, this piece, and then this piece here. I said, I want it in one piece. Well, they didn't tell me, called a failure to disclose, that the parts were going to come with a beautiful refrigerator gel coat so you can just scuff it and paint it with your base coat, clear coat. But it came, you can see the mold lines that stick up 1/8 of an inch. I've ground them down partially, did a spray can over here because number one, the parts don't fit. They're thicker than what they should be. And when you're working with a semicircle from here down to here going through angles, if it's at all thicker, it's going to be tight at the bottom or loose at the top. And as you can see, that's the way I did it. So we got a huge gap here. Not only that, the inner fender doesn't fit at all. and they're not standing behind their products.
Crazy story. It's crazy, man.
So I found, what is it, Shermersheim. They're bought up by Bloom. I guess you call it Bloom. They make good products, and they do it exactly what it's supposed to be. And they're customers, so I'll replace these things and settle up with this guy later on with an attorney if I have to. And then I'll strip the car down to basically and they don't use gel coat anymore. I understand that the gel coat basically is responsible for making the spider webbing in the paint, according to one guy who rebuilt his own car. So they got new epoxy coatings now. I'll use that. And if possible, I'd really like to use the I don't like base coat, clear coat, because it peels off eventually, but I guess you get good products if you get top of the line clear coat. But I always liked the acrylic lacquer. You just use primer and paint, and that was it. And you'd polish it up and use the wax, and now they got super ceramic, nanoparticle things that totally make it smooth and last much longer than the wax jobs. So I may do that if I can find the paint to match it, rather than base coat, clear coat. See if that makes any difference. Yeah. Okay. How's that? Okay. Well, when I first got the engine, the first thing that happened was the heads, the studs, rocker arm studs pulled out of the heads. So I checked it out, and they were the original humpback heads, 202 valves. They were really famous for performance back in the day. They wanted $800 to repair the heads. I said, the heck with that. So I upgraded to the World Product Sportsman 2 heads with 64 cc runners on it. And I had a milled 40,000s and put that in there. Then after that, as I went to Florida to celebrate, because I just spent 7 months, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week with a regular job, building this engine, this car together, it started knocking. There was a knock in there, and professionals kept saying, it's not a rod, let me know what you find out what it was. Well, it turned out it was a bad crank. The thrust bearings were banging. So I got a reground crank and had the engine balanced, so I thought, and put it together. And what happened after that was when I was driving out of Florida north through Ripley, Virginia, just south of the southern border of Ohio, the engine just quit. The engine would run, but I lost all power to the wheels. So it ended up towing the car with a dolly. Had a friend come down from Ohio, and we towed it up to Ohio. What happened was, it was an eBay crank that I purchased, used off eBay, and what happened was that I figure, since it came apart, obviously the engine hit a wall or something. It stopped instantly. Maybe a rod was thrown. Stressed the crank, and my engine rebuilder didn't see it, and it just finally came apart. So then I got the reground crank. Then, what I realized after that, all sorts of vibrations in the front of the car. I said, oh, how could that happen? I just had the engine balanced. So I figured, well, maybe it's the transmission, but I just spent $3,000 for the Richmond 6-speed, so how could it be that? So anyway, I replaced the throw bearing in that. I had the alignment checked, I had the balance checked on here. Finally, worst case scenario, The harmonic balancer was ready to come off. Took the engine all apart. My rebuilder put the engine on a crank, or the crank on a wheel. He spun it. He says it was so out of balance that it almost flew off his stand. So the engine balancer didn't do what he was supposed to do. Although he was a professional, he cheated me out of $200. So I went back down and I got $550 back from the guy from the damage it caused. And that he was more than $1,000 damage. He was kind of scared because he knew he cheated me. He had his son with him the whole time. So that was the story on that. So then I had my engine balanced again. And I made all the upgrades, which I previously told you about. And I still kept the, if you notice here, well, we should save that for later, huh? Now, when you go to YouTube, there's a guy, basically, he rebuilds cars, Corvettes wrong. So he can show you the right way to do it and what the problems are. But he said, one of the things he said was, you upgrade this, because this is just a one-cylinder thing where they have, that's for all four wheels. Well, they upgraded it after that. You got two cylinders, one for the front, one for the rear. Because he said, without this, if this fails, you have nothing. But he was wrong, because ignoring, you got a manual cable emergency brake which will lock up the rear wheels and stop you, and also have the transmission where you can downshift as well. So I've driven these cars over 200,000, well over 200,000 miles, and it's never failed me yet. Now that I put in the silicone .5 brake fluid, which is non-hydroscopic, doesn't attract moisture, therefore it's not going to rust out the lines. But I did go stainless steel brake lines and the hoses too. So that was that. And one other thing I noticed when I was watching the Jay Leno videos, he had his professional builder rebuild his engine, and as soon as he opened up the hood for his '63 Corvette, I saw what he totally forgot to put on there. Well, right here, which are not mounted on here, are blocks. Two blocks here on either side, and one block here on either side. Basically, they're hood alignment blocks. One's adjustable, and it's nylon up top. The one here, it's basically metal, and it keeps your hood from vibrating back inside. That was the only year they did it in '63. And here's a professional rebuilder, and he doesn't know, and he forgot that, put that on there. And I put that on there just because I thought it would be good, and I remember the '63 had it to keep the hood alignment in place, because sometimes if they're not aligned properly, they can pop up again a little bit. And I remember my '63 head used to pop up when I drive along, and I noticed that when I hit about 90 miles an hour, the hood would actually float because the air coming over the engine like that. So that was kind of nice. Anyway, it doesn't happen anymore. No, not lately. I think it was 2 years ago. I was down here, I saw, well, they ran this style from '63 to '67, so they call this the C2 Corvettes. Now, I don't know what year it was. It was a C2 Corvette. It was a red one, driving down the street. That's about all. I don't see them on the road anymore. They're in garages, and some of them never touch the ground. They're called trailer queens. These guys, they just take them around to shows, and they back them out on dirt pads, and they never touch the ground. And they almost pass out masks because germ shields, they don't want germs, and you certainly can't touch the car. So that's the way they do it. Is I'm the only one driving it because they're built to drive, and it's a fun driver. It's been around the country about 5 or 6 times: Ohio, Florida, California, Idaho, Montana, Arizona, back to Florida again. 2,600 miles from here to Montana, which is where I'm heading after it warms up again this year.
How many mileage?
On this car, from 24 years, I've got 164,000 miles. And I have to rebuild the rings on it because that Phytech fuel injection system failed on me. The fan sensor went out, cooked my friggin' engine. I redid the heads, cost me $600. I do all the work. And now it looks like I got to do a ring job too. No, I never had any problems with it. And by the way, as soon as they announced that the 1871 Act of London, which made us corporate USA, corporate America, that's going to be switched back to the U.S. Restored Republic. There won't be any DMV because people under constitutional right have a right to travel. And you don't need a license to travel unless you're commercial. Uber, hauling merchandise, that's a different story, then you need a license. Other than that, you won't need to. And also, you won't need to register your vehicle under the U.S. Constitution because like any other appliance, do you register your refrigerator or your stove? No. So you won't need to register your vehicle. Yeah. Yeah, the interior, well, like I say, it's nice leather seat covers. And one thing I learned through experience is I use silicone. Silicone is really good for tires and rubbers. And I started putting it on my dash, and I said, oh, it'll make my seat covers shiny and keep them soft. Well, I'll tell you what, silicone makes your seat covers soft if they're leather, but they'll crack. And I ruined a whole set of seat covers using silicone. Then finally I took Al Knox recommendation, who's got probably one of the best interiors on the seat covers in the market. He basically said just to use Pledge on it, which has got its own natural oilers. They use it for wood, and it's good for seat covers, the oil, and it's got a little bit of wax in there. It's when you finish, you can polish it up, and it gives a nice sheen, but the oils keep it soft and working. And so far, they've been really good so far over the years. And the sound system, basically, I upgraded to an AM/FM cassette, 1984 Pioneer, 25 watts per channel, which is certainly a heck of a lot more power and sounds a lot better than the Custom Auto Sound 200 watts that they bragged about, which is not totally honest in my opinion. And it didn't last that long because they failed a couple of times, and this thing always sounds really good. So, and then I hooked it up with two 6x9 Polk speakers on here with some really good sound. One's up front, one's in the back. Good sound, huh? Only 25 watts per channel. It certainly beat the pants off that Custom Auto Sound they had, and I ended up fixing it when they didn't even bother. So that was the story on that. Well, the clock, I was going to upgrade to the new quartz system, but I decided to keep the old one. And you go, well, why is that? Well, I asked them, see, the difference is the old one draws 3 amps momentarily because there's a little coil inside there that when the coil and the mechanism runs down, the 2 contact tips will hit and make contact. When that happens, the spring kicks it back and winds it up for about 1 minute and 45 seconds. And that way it clicks on its own. So anyway, it's a momentary 3 amps compared to 0.03 amps for the new quartz. But they told me the quartz are good except when you drop them, they don't work. Well, I've already dropped this and it still works. Plus the fact that there is a self-correcting mechanism for time in this thing. So in other words, if you're off slow or fast any more than 2 or 3 minutes, you can adjust it to the correct time. They say don't go past where it's supposed to be. And there's a self-correcting mechanism there, and you do it enough times, it'll keep perfect time because it self-corrects. Steering wheel is nice. You can look it straight on there, driving down the road, you see all the gauges, everything here, you know, from your battery to your fuel to your tachometer, or not the tachometer, this is the tach, this is the speedometer, and then we got the oil pressure gauge, and then we got the temperature for here. And a lighter, you can run extras here since not too many people smoke these days. And my wiper over here in the headlights, and then the headlight switch here. And what's nice about here, we got 2 vents on either side, which totally opens up and you get a giant airflow of air coming in here to cool you off when you're traveling down the highways. And then here is your emergency brake, which locks up the rear wheels if you want. And it's totally cable operated, so it's mechanical. AC? No AC. If you want AC, air conditioning, I just open the vents here, roll down the windows, and worst case scenario, I'll roll down the top. So that's my AC. But you used to be able to, you get them with AC as an option.
This
But
is manual AC, right? Manual.
that's right, manual. Everything in the car is manual, including the 6-speed manual transmission. And it's got a lot of adjustments in here. Like you got 2 different adjustments for your clutch. You can adjust it like I did for the speed shifting, which basically you can shift it right like that from there to there. Whereas before, in the other position, you had to go all the way down and then let it off before. So it's in the quick shifting. And the car also has a quick steering adjustment right at the idler arm at the wheel. So you can lock it up and get a quicker steering ratio, which I like that because it's only 2-point turns lock to lock.
This is original mirror, right?
Yeah, it comes right off a Chevy. The regular Chevy, that's how they were able to, it's not a special Corvette mirror. The heck? Well, that's a little better. Well, yeah, one little incident happened when I was driving out of Florida on Highway 95, and all of a sudden you try and be aware of everything, and this started vibrating. And no sooner did I stick my hand over there, and it blew off right in my hand instead of down the highway, and then I was able to pull over to the side of the road and re-glue it with some good adhesive to hold it in place ever since. So that's one little story I had on it. And they only came from the factory with one mirror on one side, but what I did was I put another one on the other side of the car too, so I could see off that side for safety purposes.
Wow.
New stories. Well, which one was I was going to tell you? I forget. What was it about I was going to tell you? Oh yes, when I had my '63 Corvette. It was back in early '60s. It was near you're a teenager. It's all about burning rubber. Well, I'll tell you, I used to lay patches to see how far I could lay a patch between telephone poles to telephone poles. And well, one time we were going down to Georgia, meet a couple girls, party at their summer houses down there, and friends of the Callaways, the Callaway Corvette. The rear end went out in Elkin, North Carolina. The clutch system went out. So for $150, we ordered on the new clutch pack, and I left it there, and we went back down there, and I fixed it on the way back up. So that was one of the stories on there. Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I wasn't a bad-looking guy back then, for any means, but the car, geez, it was a new car, and everyone loved the looks of it. It was brand new, first year of that edition, and girls were glad to go out with me. It was no problem, never had a problem getting a date. But anyway, the way I drove sometimes was kind of radical, so when I went down to college, I had trouble getting dates down there because I drove a little bit on the radical side of things. I know one time I had a guy with me, and he wanted to see how it performed, so I was kind of speeding through it was at Ohio University, and there's a lot of cars. It was kind of towards the outskirts of the city, but cars are parked on either side of the road. And I went around this curve, and it had a curve coming up on the left, and there were stores on the right, bars, and a car came around in my lane over, and the only way I could avoid an accident by hitting him was to go straight into a parked car. So basically, I slammed on the brakes, and just before I going to hit the rear end of hit the parked car to avoid this other car that was coming in my lane, I cut the wheel to the right to go down an alley, and then I let off on the brake and cut it back again and went right down the friggin' sidewalk. And thank God there was nobody coming out of a bar at that time. Otherwise, I'd have mowed him right down. And I went down to the end of the block and then came back on the highway again and avoided any accident. So that was, the guy was kind of surprised. He said, "Well, you think really fast." So it was a quick and nicely move. Okay, well, this is my driver, and I'm heading out to California one day, driving through New Mexico. You know, I'm doing 125 miles an hour down this road down there. It's a little wavy, so it was going up and down. You know, and I just installed the fiberglass transfer springs from Vet Brakes and Products, which are now out of business. And I said, look, I got it set. There's 4 different settings in these springs, and I probably should have had it set in a harder setting because I left it in the soft setting for a better ride. But the transfer spring gives more stability in handling. So I had a full tank of gas and 150 pounds of luggage, so that's quite a bit of weight. So driving on this road, but it's wavy, so the car is going up and down a little bit. Finally, what happened, the spring gave way and broke in half, the rear spring, and it fell right on the exhaust pipes. And I had 2 finger in clearance between that and dragging on the highways. But that basically took away the shock absorbers, and there was no shock absorbers that would function because, you know, I'm riding on the bottom, right on the exhaust pipes. And that's what kept me going. If it hadn't been for my seat belt, I had to put my head right through this roof because you try and stay ahead of traffic doing 75 to 85 miles an hour from New Mexico down into Oceanside, California, which is where I was going to. Well, my head would have gone right through there. But I made it safely, and finally when I got there, I ended up, actually talked to Duntoff, and they said I'd be better off just going to the transverse rear 7-spring setup, steel, and that's what I did. But I did keep the transverse fiberglass spring on the front. Still to the day, been working great for handling and cornering and drivability because I like pushing it pedal to the metal now and then. There's an interesting story, a true story, when back in 1963 when I had my Corvette, and I was dating, she was from double dating. My buddy had his own car and I had mine, and the 2 girls would come from wealthy families, and she was a little mouthy and a little pushy, and she kept complaining about my driving, and I didn't think my driving was that bad. It was okay. So I got tired of hearing her complain about my driving, so I thought I'd give her something to complain about. So what I did was I pulled up to an intersection. It was residential, and it was a 5 intersection in a residential 5 intersection, so it was plenty of space. It was a big long intersection. My buddy was behind me, and so I basically hit 3 grand on the tachometer and popped the clutch and did a couple of donuts in the smoke, and I went around and around, and then I stopped, and the telephone pole got close, and I revved it and spun the car around the other way. My buddy said it was so much smoke, he said you couldn't even see the car. So then I took the girl back to her house, and I got back and laid in the trampoline. She went in the house because I guess it scared the pee out of her. She came back now after a couple of minutes and laid in the trampoline, and she just said, "God, it's good to be alive." And she never complained about it, said another word about my driving ever again. Yes, back in '63 when I loved to drag race. I was drag racing a GTO out in Farallon, California, or Farallon, Akron, Ohio. And of course I beat him, and I went down the road, turned around, and on the way back, a cop had pulled him over, and basically he went to flag me down. Instead of pulling over and stopping, I just said the heck with it. I just downshifted and floored it and kept on going. And so he go scot-free because for drag racing, you got to have 2 people, and they couldn't catch me, so I got away with that. But about a week later, I was at a gas station down in the valley, and the cop cars pulled up next to me, and they said, "If there's going to be any more outrunning the cops, there are going to be some lockups. He said, look at your tires, they're bald." And I said, "Well, they were a little worn." And he said, "There's going to be some lockups." And I said, "Well, you know, tires don't last forever. You got to replace them once in a while." But anyway, they went off and left me alone at that point, just under a threat. Yeah, the problem was back then, these cars were they were hot. The cops would, I'd see him, I'd pass him. I'm doing speed limit on a double lane highway, and I'd see a car, his lights would pass me, and I'd see him slow down, turn around, and come up and follow me just so he could write me a ticket for something like that. So I had to watch out. As far as I was concerned, every car was a cop car until I could prove otherwise. And one time, I was kind of speeding through the town. It was Stowe, Ohio, and the cops were really strict there. And I saw him, I was kind of zipping down the street, and he pulled out of the police station, and there he was. He's coming down my way. So I said, to heck with it. He's not going to pull me over for anything. So I like buried it, and I'm doing probably about 90 miles an hour. Anyway, it went through. It was a stop sign area. Luckily, there was nothing coming. I just went by my intuition and went flying through the intersection, around that corner, past another car on a curve. It was like a 55-mile curve, and I was doing a hell of a lot faster than that. And I passed him on the curve, and then I just buried it down the road and got away from him, and he never got me.